Today we're talking about a very hot topic. It's interesting that things go wrong when things are what we might want to say is sensitive, but we're talking about the politicizing and religiousizing of music. And what the heck does that mean? Um, if as an immigrant to this country, probably the two things that the USA is known for, if you speak to most people in the world who have heard of the USA, they will probably think that the USA does two things: politics and business. That's it. Okay, so we politicize everything right now, and it was just getting to a point where I don't think this is appropriate for musicians. And to highlight this fact, just this week I actually had somebody who spoke, who sent me a message, and I put out that message. I don't know if you saw it. Basically summarizing today's topics on my own social media sites. And this guy who claims to be a conductor himself, he's relatively young, says, "Do I know anything about music?" Well, yeah, I do. I've spent my entire life since the age of 7 involved in music full time. And yes, my views are not academic; they're not political. And I don't apologize for that. But I'm sorry that if you don't get that, then you're missing out on a huge deal. We've spoken before. We had a whole session about there's more to music than music. I recommend you go back and listen to that one if you can. So what am I talking about with regards to politicizing and religiousizing music? I like what Steve Harvey says. Okay, Steve Harvey, he was relating this to success, but I think this applies to music itself. And he actually said, logically, it doesn't make sense that to grow something, if you think about growing a plant, you need to dig a hole, put it down in the hole, put the plant down in the hole, and cover it with dirt. You have to cover the seed with dirt in order for it to grow. And I like that quote because that's exactly what happens to music. Music is so much deeper than what we give it credit for. There is so much more to music than just the notes on the page. And yet, because we add meaning to it, we politicize it, we create religious meaning to music, it's not quite, it's like soil, I guess. The soil or the dirt covers it up so that the music can grow into a big oak tree. That's how I view music. Once it sprouts through the dirt, through the soil, then it becomes this massive, gorgeous thing. The only problem is, unfortunately, most of us, as soon as the sprout comes up through, as soon as it pokes through the dirt, I wish you could see the video, I'm making lots of hand signs. As soon as the music starts to sprout through the dirt, we trample on it, we squash it, we get rid of it, we press it back down again, so it's always in the dirt. It's always in the soil. It never actually gets released. So, and we do that by assigning meaning to the music, which may or may not be there. So I want to explore these topics about politics and religion in music, how and why it's assigned to that, and what can we do about it? You know, what? So what? Why is there more to music than music? So the first thing let's explore is music is apolitical. Apolitical. Now this comes back from my biology days back in England when I was in school, and we first came across the term asexual. Of course, I went to a boys' grammar school in the UK, and as teenagers, horny teenagers, it was, you know, very asexual. He mentioned that word. So, but it stuck with me because of that, I guess. I don't know, but the word a means the absence of. It's not just the opposite. When you add the word a in front of it, it takes away that meaning. So music is apolitical. Music is apolitical. It doesn't have any politics to it. Now, don't get me wrong. We do politicize it because there are some lyrics that are not apolitical. In fact, there are lots of songs out there where, and in fact, even, yeah, I mean, lots and lots of songs that add politics, that have hidden meanings, overt meanings, all that kind of stuff. So the words themselves are what makes a song political, but the music itself cannot be political. We are not apolitical. Individual human beings. We are all very political animals, beings. We have it in us, and when it's promoted as much as it is, and there is such a big industry in the USA, then you can't escape it. Everything that we do somehow gets politicized. And sometimes that's a shame. So we are not apolitical. But music is. And that's all I want to say for that third item. Music is apolitical. I'm re-emphasizing it because it's important. Now, you could, in fact, look at some composers in the past who haven't actually put lyrics to their music, but they give it a title that sounds political. Or, for example, somebody like the Russian composers under the USSR, they hid meaning in their music. The most famous example, I think, is Shostakovich Symphony No. 5. Last year, the Florida Orchestra did an exploration. They did what the Discovery Orchestra do. They did a lecture for the first half and then performed the piece for the second half. And it was fascinating because a lot of people, it's great music, it's wonderful music, but a lot of people don't know the history behind it. And there is some quotes, there are some passages in there which the composer intended to be a political statement, but you wouldn't know that listening to it. Shostakovich also wrote one of my favorite pieces, the Festive Overture. I was hoping we would play that this year in the Dunedin concert band. It doesn't look like we'll be able to manage that, but certainly next year we'll program it. But the Festive Overture is an absolutely phenomenal, fantastic piece of music. And it's only years after I first played it and heard it, and even after I first conducted it, that I found a story attributed to the Festive Overture of why it exists and why it was written. And oh my goodness, it ruined it for me. It completely changed my perspective. So I have since chosen to ignore that, acknowledge it, not ignore it, but acknowledge that that was perhaps the meaning that was assigned to that piece of music by the composer. But I've chosen to focus on the impact that piece of music had on me before I knew that, the innocent part. When I was innocent to its meaning, when I was focused just on the music. And it's, you know, it's really funny. My wife is a literature major. She's a geek in the literature world, right? So to her, words and meaning are everything, from Cervantes onwards. So when we met, she was all about, we had the same CDs of musical shows on our shelves. And she was all about the lyrics, and I was all about all the music. And I didn't understand what half these shows were. And some of the shows that I had on my CD shelf, she was like, "Oh my goodness, seriously? Do you know what that's about?" I'm like, "No, I have no idea." Because to me, the lyrics were not as important as the music. Whereas to her, it's the opposite. The story is more important. And when we go and see shows and opera and ballet and theatre, if there are songs in that performance which are basically just songs for song's sake, they don't actually move the story forward, then she gets bored, and I do too, because there's no meaning to it. It's just entertainment. So it's interesting how that's happened. So I choose quite often to acknowledge that there is an intent, a meaning, a history that is politically motivated by either the composer or the critics afterwards or the people who commissioned it. But I go deeper than that. I look to see what more there is to this than just the music. And if I like what's there, great. If it helps me appreciate and get a response, get more goosebumps, then that's fantastic. I'm doing all these hand signs. You can't see them. If I get a better response, from the music because I understand and appreciate the meaning behind it or the lyrics behind it, then great. Otherwise, I will choose to take a step back, focus on what's going on musically and emotionally. And it's the same with religion. Music itself is a-religious. It doesn't have religion. And of course, I'm using the modern definition of the term religion, which is like a faith-based organization or belief system, worldview. Okay, that's how I'm using the term religion here. Religious, yes, there are religions or religious activity in a lot of performances, in a lot of music playing. For example, a musician will get up, they'll do certain warm-ups first before they actually start playing. Most will. The way you open your case and put your instrument together, the way you close it down again afterwards. There are routines. The order in which you practice music, the order in which you rehearse music, the expectations in the concert hall, all these are religious activities. But I'm talking here about the faith-based worldview. Music doesn't have one. Now, again, I'm going to say it. There are some lyrics that are not a-religious. Yeah, I know it's the same as the other one, but it's a completely different point. A lot of people write songs and they add lyrics to it, and those lyrics represent or reflect their worldview. And of course, then you get into all sorts of arguments, is how strongly do those lyrics reflect the worldview? But that's a whole other matter. That's nothing to do with the music. The music itself doesn't actually have any faith-based worldview connotations. We as individuals are not a-religious. We all have some sort of religious activity. I can put my hand on my heart and say to you, most of you listening have a routine in the morning. Get up, at some point you shower or brush your teeth or do something. You have a routine that occurs in the same order. We know Josh got up at the same time this morning as he normally does in the week, went to the gym, had a cup of coffee. That's what he normally does. So we are religious by nature. But music itself is not. Music is a-religious. Some lyrics are not, we are not, music is. So when you come across songs, particular, or even just media, I mean, look at Bach. Bach is considered the father of contemporary academic music. In fact, even let's go back before Bach. Some of the first non-folk music. So consider folk music as being the kind of noise people were singing in their backyard as they're hanging up the washing or digging the grounds. Okay, that's traditional folk music. It's handed down by word of mouth. We don't know. There's no record of it other than just what we think we hear and what others have repeated over the ages, from generation to generation. There's no record of it, and it's changed over the years. When people started recording music, meaning they wrote it down, it was actually in the church because the monks figured out it was easier to memorize all their liturgy when they sang it. Well, if you sing this way, that's for that particular piece of liturgy. If you sing it this way, it's for that piece of liturgy. And it started out with one line with the plain chant and then a couple of notes up and down. There's a wonderful book in the Cathedral of Seville that shows the earliest form of written music that we have. Beautiful book, huge book. But it's all came out of religion. Then Bach came along and he kind of is known as the father of modern music, meaning he invented rules and regulations for the writing of music, and also he showed us how to break those rules, which I think is fabulous. So there are rules about rule breaking. Okay, that's interesting. But at the end of every single piece, he wrote a little phrase. And I don't remember, it's Solo Deo Gloria, something like that. It's for the glory of God. Every single piece that he wrote SDG. Because he attributed that religious connotation. He understood for him that's where music came from, and that's where he was giving it back to. And now, of course, we have lots of people who write music for religions, and also we have people who write music who are against religions, anti-religion, world faith, world view. That's their meaning. You can still listen to a piece of music without knowing any of its history, anything about its composer or the context it was written in. and just be absolutely subliminal. For example, Arvo Pärt, P-A-R-T. He is a Lithuanian composer, beautiful choral music, and he utilizes the cathedral, the stone cathedrals that he has in his country. And it is gorgeous stuff, and I recommend you just go ahead and listen to it. Yes, he ascribes meaning to it, he has words to it. Same with John Rutter. John Rutter is another choral composer, this one from England, and he spent his life editing hymn books. So he writes a lot of great choral music, and he uses the Bible to actually create a lot of his text. But he declares himself an atheist. So he writes this incredible music. He uses religion and religious texts for his lyrics, but the music itself is not religious. Okay, so bear in mind all of this. What the heck is music? If it's not political, if it's not religious, and yet that's probably 90% of the music that's out there, then what is it? Well, we've explored this before. It's a language. Rabbi Zacharias used to call it the language of the soul. Most people know it's the language of emotions. So what the heck does this language actually say? Well, we don't know. What we do know is the after effects. What we do know is how it makes us feel. So we don't exactly know what the language itself, the language of music itself, actually says. What we do know is that how it makes us feel. And I refer quite often, like George Mariner Moore, to the goosebump thing. All right? There are times when the hairs on the back of your neck stick up when you're listening to really, really good music. Or at least music played really well. Shared really well. Sang really well. So it speaks emotions. It helps us deal with emotions. We've explored this before. Helps us deal with emotions, helps us process emotions, helps us explore emotions, experience emotions we haven't felt before in a different way. So if that's the case, then why do we add stories to music? Why do we put meaning to it? Well, if you consider the fact that we still only use less than 8% of our brain power, we need some way to process this language of emotions. We need to classify it. We need to categorize it. We need to pigeonhole it. We need to stick a label on it. I hate labels. You know, it's I've said this before. Get used to it, okay? Don't be fooled. There is no box. Because I can't stand the phrase when people say, think outside the box. Well, who put the box there in the first place? You did. Nobody else did. You did. You allowed yourself to be put into a box. You allowed your thinking to be boxed up. So thinking outside the box is irrelevant because there is no box. It doesn't exist. But it is a way for us to actually quickly and easily process because we don't understand our brains fully yet. In fact, 92% of our brains we don't understand or use. So we need to classify it somehow, and therefore we ascribe meaning to music. We use music, we manipulate music for our political and religious purposes. We add lyrics to it. There's recently a song that came out. It used to be a beautiful hymn, and now it is a political statement. They have changed some of the lyrics, and it's become a political statement. And it's the opposite way around as well. There was a wonderful song, Nobody Does It Better. I first learned this in a church environment. And later on, I heard the original version. I didn't know it was the original version, but I heard a version that said, instead of the word Jesus in it, it had the word baby. And I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe they've taken this song and they've secularized it. It sounds so really crazy. Well, it turns out it was the other way around. That the original was baby. It was one of the James Bond movies. Nobody Does It Better. I forget who sings it. But that was the original. And what I heard was the adaptation, the changing of its meaning. So we add stories to things in order to classify it, to actually process the emotions that we think we're feeling. I tell people all the time in music, listen to the music and run a movie in your head. And believe me, your movie is going to be different to my movie. What you see, what you feel is going to be completely different to the person sitting next to you or opposite you or behind you. Everybody experiences music differently, and there's no right or wrong answer. That's why we add stories to music, so we can process it. So if we don't understand, if we can't process music itself, and we have to ascribe meaning to it, and we have to add stories, and how effective is music. How effective is it? I can tell you exactly how effective it is. You can measure it by the goosebumps that you get, the number of times that you experience those thrills, the number of times you feel sad, or you notice that you are quiet, or you notice that you are happy and laughing and sitting upright. In fact, there are now ways to measure it. And the Dunedin Music Society is at the forefront of practicing, of actually implementing a scientific method that was developed in Austria. We are actually taking what is it called? The Geneva Emotion Music Scale. And we're going to be using that to actually measure the effectiveness of music on performers and audiences, so that we can find out and actually put some, again, so that we can classify it, because, you know, we can't process music. We don't understand enough of it. It is such a deep, beautiful thing. We don't know how to work it. So we're going to measure it using the GEMS 9 survey. Be prepared for that. Every time you experience something, you're going to get this survey. You can do it online. It's very quick and easy. Just a handful of, like, 9 questions or something, 8 or 9 questions. And we'll find out what music says, what the language of emotions actually tells us. Okay, so very hot topics. Music is not political. It is apolitical. Some lyrics are not, we are not, but music is. Music is a-religious. It doesn't have a worldview. Some lyrics are not a-religious. We are not a-religious, but music is. And it is a language. It's a language of emotions. We don't know what it says to us other than what we experience and feel. And that's why we have to add stories, so that we can actually process what music is saying to us. And we're going to start measuring how effective it actually is, and how it changes people's worldviews, how it changes people's lives, how it helps them prevent. You know, there's a thing out there about mental health right now. Finally, at long last, people are dealing with the mental health fallout from COVID. We've been so focused on the physical health. I've been really upset about that, because there are a lot of people suffering in lots of different ways with their mental health. And one of the most ignored parts of mental health is emotion. Well, music is the language of emotions, and we are helping people get to the point where they need mental health services. Not everyone, you know, we can't save everyone, but music is preventative. You get involved in live, in-person music, your life will be different. It'll be a lot better and less likely to actually need the drugs and mental health services, which so many people in the world desperately need. I applaud them. I'm glad they're there. But you know what? Get involved with music first. You may not actually need them as much as you think. So, wow. Okay, hot topics indeed. I'm going to hand this back to Josh now, because that was intense.